Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in the frequently asked questions section of the book. This is the very last part of the book where there's some additional content that I cover here towards the end of the group learning program. Because on October 20th, we're going to be restarting the group learning program from the very beginning. That's only 2 weeks from now, where I'll be starting from the beginning. Next week, we still have class, and I'm going to be teaching a topic there, but that topic isn't actually in the book. So today's class is the last class of all the remaining topics at the end of the book. Not only are you going to be learning about the frequently asked questions today, these are 11 frequently asked questions, but you're also going to be learning about how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. This is part of the content that's at the very end of the book. And we're even going to be talking about some things that aren't at the end of the book, like the last and final words of the Buddha, what he said right before his death, and things like this. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you to join for meditation. I'm going to start with some chanting to ease us into meditation. Then I'll come in with some guidance. Then there'll be a period of time where we're just meditating together. And then I'm going to come out of the meditation with some more chanting. And then that's where we'll start our class today. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Photang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti Pisu Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Poto Sati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathe in naturally through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสานามาสติสตาตาวามานุสนังโพโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I'd like to once again welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. Welcome to everyone who's on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or anybody who's listening to this on the replay. Welcome to everyone. As I mentioned, today's class is all about the frequently asked questions sections that are in the back of the book and some miscellaneous content that's there. There's some content about how to determine if you're actually enlightened or not. Because over the last 7 months, I've been sharing with students the teachings that it takes to develop a foundation in the path to enlightenment and helping you to be able to understand what enlightenment is and how to move the mind to this enlightened mental state. But here at the end of the book, what I do is I take some time to address some frequently asked questions that students typically will ask at different times. And these particular frequently asked questions didn't necessarily fit in anywhere else in the book, but here at the end they fit in really nicely. And then also helping students to understand how to determine if you've actually attained enlightenment. So I'm going to help you understand these 11 questions that students oftentimes ask. And remember, you can ask questions as we go. I'm going to pause at some different times, opening up to any questions that you guys might have. You can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any and all questions that you like. So jumping right into this, one of the first questions that is very common that people ask a lot is, how do I become Buddhist? This might be something that even crossed your mind at one time or another. Well, this question of how do I become Buddhist is the mind wanting to become something, wanting to hold on to some kind of label. For those of you guys that remember personal existence view in the universal truth of non-self, this is the mind trying to cling to an identity. Well, you don't need to become a Buddhist, and there's nobody in the world that has made certain criteria that this is what determines what a Buddhist is or isn't, because there's no one that has that authority to determine that. Instead, a better question here would be, how do I attain enlightenment? Because any kind of labels that the mind has adopted over the course of its life, in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to have to drop those labels. You're going to need to train your mind to not identify with this as who you are as a person. So it's interesting to remember that the Buddha himself was not a Buddhist. Right? The Buddha was not a Buddhist. So the idea of adopting this identity of I am a Buddhist would be unwise, because it's just going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. The idea of someone being a Buddhist didn't come about until after the death of the Buddha, where somebody, maybe several hundred years later started to come up with this idea. Well, the more valid question and the better question to think about here is, how do I attain enlightenment? Because that's what somebody really needs to do if they're considering themselves Buddhist, or they're wanting to consider themselves Buddhist. What they need to be able to do is firmly get on the path to enlightenment to be able to actually attain enlightenment. And the way that you attain enlightenment is that you learn, you reflect, to independently verify, and you practice, starting with the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths is the first step on the Eightfold Path. That's establishing right view, and then learning and practicing all the individual steps or factors on the Eightfold Path. You're going to need to know the Eightfold Path inside and out, backwards and forwards, left, right, up, down. You're going to need to know it like the back of your hand. You're going to need to commit it to your memory. So all those individual factors of the Eightfold Path and all the things behind those factors, you're going to need to be able to remember those. And if you haven't studied that in a way to remember it and retain it, then that's something that you can be doing. And since we're going to be restarting the group learning program here in a couple of weeks, I'm actually going to be starting the group learning program with 3 individual sessions towards the beginning of the program, where I'm going to be breaking down the Eightfold Path in its 3 individual sections, and I'm going to be going very thoroughly into each individual section. So this is an opportunity for you to learn it once again, if you'd like to learn it in class, but also you have it in the books and the other resources that I share, where you can go through and essentially memorize each one of those factors, because you're not going to be able to consult your book when it's time to practice these factors. You're going to need to commit it to your memory so that you just know it cold. Okay, so the way to become Buddhist is to not become a Buddhist, is to not adopt this label of I am a Buddhist, but instead to learn and practice the Eightfold Path, and that's how the mind actually moves to enlightenment. Another question that's frequently asked is, do I need to give up all my possessions, occupation, and relationships to attain enlightenment? The short answer here is no, you don't need to do that. In fact, some people mistakenly think that the Buddha actually did this, but the Buddha didn't actually do this. He didn't give up all of his possessions, he didn't give up his occupation, and he didn't give up his relationships. Instead, he had possessions. He had a bowl, he had robes, he had these things. He even had an occupation. He was a teacher, right? He didn't have a salary, he wasn't working for a boss, but he had a livelihood, he had an occupation, and he also had relationships. He had many, many, many students. He had his son, his wife, his mother, which was actually a stepmother. All these different people ended up coming and ordaining with him. So he had relationships. So it's not that you need to give up your possessions, your occupation, or your relationships. You need to eliminate the longing, yearning, the holding on to these things, wanting them to be permanent. This is what's going on inside the mind. Usually when somebody's asking this question, it's because they don't understand what a craving, desire, attachment is. The mind thinks that, with its lack of wisdom, that the craving, desire, attachment is the possessions or the occupation itself or the relationships themselves. Those aren't the actual attachments. The cravings, desires, the attachments, this is inside the mind, where the mind's longing, yearning, and pulling towards the objects of its affection. So if you have a mobile phone, if you have a computer, if you have a house and a car, and you have relationships with maybe a life partner or friends or family, you can have all of these things and still get to enlightenment. It's just that you need to learn how to train your mind to not be attached attached to them. So for example, in a relationship, you need to learn how to not put your expectations on people and try to control people, get them to do things your way. With your possessions, you need to understand that they're all impermanent, that you can't have these things permanently, that they are going to come and go in and out of your life. And that's okay, that's impermanence. But when you hold on to them and crave for them to be permanent, that's where you struggle, and that's where you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment. So just giving up your possessions, occupation, and relationships isn't actually going to produce enlightenment, actually. It's what's going on inside the mind that's going to produce enlightenment. Another question that's oftentimes asked is, what is reincarnation and rebirth? Are they the same thing? Well, again, the short answer is no, they're not the same thing. And the Buddha actually did not teach reincarnation. He taught the cycle of rebirth, or what we're translating as the cycle of rebirth. He taught that beings are constantly coming into the world over and over and over again, but they're a new being every single time. There's a new body and there's a new mind every single time that a being comes into the world. So in the original teachings of the Buddha, in the Pali Canon, the Pali word that's being used here is samsara. And this Pali word samsara is often translated to the cycle of rebirth. But if you look at what the Buddha taught about this topic of samsara and you deeply understand it, he actually didn't teach something called rebirth, because there isn't anything actually being reborn. This is the way people are translating it and have been translating it for multiple years. Instead, a better way to think about this is the cycle of new existence, because every single time a being comes into the world, it's a completely new existence. So here's a way that you can think about it logically. If you think about, there's a cardboard box A, and this cardboard box represents the mind and thus a life that is in the world. This cardboard box is a certain shape, a certain color, a certain texture, a certain size. And there's contents in this cardboard box. There's cravings and there's residual memories. Well, at the end of this life, this cardboard box is going to dissolve. The mind is impermanent, so the mind's going to dissolve. But if there's still contents, if there's craving and residual memories, those are going to need to go forward and find a new cardboard box. They're going to need to end up in a new cardboard box. So this cardboard box B is a completely different color, different shape, different texture, different size. It's a completely new cardboard box, but it has contents from the previous cardboard box. The cravings and residual memories have come into this new cardboard box. So this has been translated as the cycle of rebirth. But as you can see, there's nothing that's actually being reborn. Instead, a better way to think about this is the cycle of new existence, because when you look at what the Buddha taught, this is more in line with what he actually taught. When you see people talking about reincarnation in relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, this is just a misunderstanding of what the Buddha actually taught, because reincarnation is dependent on a soul. This is the way that the reincarnation is taught, is that there's a everlasting, eternal, permanent soul that moves from one life to the next, and that soul goes into a new body, and it's essentially the same exact being, just with a different body, but the soul is the same. Now, for those of you guys that have been studying with me, you can hear right away, like, no way the Buddha taught this, because he taught the universal truth of impermanence. That's the very first teaching on the path to enlightenment that you learn, that things are constantly changing. So he never taught that there's this everlasting, eternal soul. He actually didn't teach whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. When the Buddha taught, he shared a discourse at one point where he shared, "This is my teachings, and these are my undeclared teachings." And one of the undeclared teachings that he talks about is he talks about whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. Essentially, he leaves it as an undeclared teaching because it conflicts with the universal truth of impermanence, and it conflicts with the universal truth of non-self. So he never taught whether there is a soul or there isn't a soul. So anybody who's talking about reincarnation or talking about a soul in relationship to the teachings of the Buddha, they just haven't studied the teachings of the Buddha close enough to understand that those things aren't actually true. It's not what the Buddha actually taught. He taught the cycle of new existence, or this cycle of rebirth, where beings are constantly coming to the world over and over and over again, but they're brand new beings every single time. Then a question that is often asked in correlation with this number 3 is number 4. Can I be a Buddhist without believing in rebirth? where we addressed about whether you can be a Buddhist, because we need to drop that label and not see it as that. And then also you understand that there's nothing that you should ever believe in the teachings of the Buddha, right? So it would be very unwise to believe in anything whatsoever, including the cycle of rebirth. Right now, if you don't have the wisdom of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, that's fine. At some point in the future, if you move into, say, the Pali Canon and English study group, when we get to volume 11, that's where we actually study all the realms of existence, and you can learn the wisdom of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. It's in volume 11, chapter 105. So if you download this, you'll actually be able to see this. So you shouldn't believe in anything whatsoever, including the 5 realms, including the cycle of rebirth, because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. That you either were convinced to believe it by somebody, or you convinced yourself to believe it. And with belief, because you don't know what's true or false, your mind can easily be shaken up. It's unsteady, it's unstable, it's uncalm. So when you get to the truth and you know with 100% certainty what is the truth, your mind can be steady and stable. It can be unshakable. So I never believed in the cycle of rebirth. Never, ever, ever, ever did I believe in the cycle of rebirth. Even when I knew early on that the Buddha had taught the cycle of rebirth, I just set it to the side. I knew that it was something that was there and that he taught, but I just set it to the side. And that's what I suggest that other people do too, that you just set it to the side. Because what's happened in the past, it's in the past. It doesn't matter right now. And what may or may not happen in the future, it's in the future. It doesn't actually matter right now. What matters is that you're in the human realm, your mind is discontent, meaning it's unenlightened, and it's important to gain wisdom to be able to cultivate the mind and actually experience enlightenment. So focusing on that is what's going to help you. And what's going to lead to enlightenment is, even though you need to ultimately understand the cycle of rebirth at some point, but what's ultimately going to lead to your improvement early on is understanding the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, meditation training, and things like this. So that's what I encourage people to really focus on. Even though we've had this 7-month program and there's been multiple things that I've been teaching at different times, it's important to deeply soak in the core central teachings. And those are some of them, the ones that I just mentioned. So the idea of believing in anything at all, or even approaching the cycle of rebirth early in your practice, is really unwise. The cycle of rebirth is in volume 11 of the 13-book series for a reason, because that's a better time to approach it. In this program, we work with volume 1, and some people even take this program more than once before they move into the Pali Canon and English study group. So there's no reason to believe in anything, but when it's time to approach that, that's when you can actually learn it and get to the point where you've independently verified it. So I don't believe in the cycle of rebirth. I know with 100% certainty that it's true because I've independently verified it and I've been able to see that. But in order for you to be able to get to that same level of confidence, you're going to need to be able to independently verify it at some point in the future. But right now may or may not be that time. And then lastly here for this number 5, and then we've got some more after this, is what does it mean to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha? And is there a ceremony to do this? Well, first, let's talk about what the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha is. A Buddha, for those of you guys who have been studying with me, you know, is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So that's what a Buddha is. And Gotama Buddha meets these criteria. Then what the Dhamma is this is the Pali word for the teachings. And then what the Sangha is this is the community. This is a Pali word that means community. This is referred to as the triple gem or the triple jewel. And you need all 3 of these things in order to get to enlightenment. You would need to have confidence in the Buddha, access to his teachings, and you need to be part of a community, because you're going to need access to teachers and you're going to need other members of the community to be able to observe and to learn from and practice the teachings with. So you're going to need to have confidence in the Buddha, access to his teachings, and be part of a community. If you only had 1 or 2 of these things, you wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment. You need all 3. So you may not have confidence in the Buddha right now. Depending on where you are in your journey, you might actually have doubt. You might have doubt whether or not he actually even existed. But as you're learning and practicing and you're training your mind and you're seeing improvement to the condition of the mind and you see how true his teachings are, your confidence will increase and ultimately you'll be able to eliminate your doubt. You have access to the teachings. You know where all the books are that I've shared at no cost, the videos, the podcasts. You have access to classes and courses and retreats. You have access to a teacher. You have access to the teachings. And you're part of a community. We have this international community of people all over the world where you can be part of this community. So you have all three of these things perhaps, or at least maybe you're working on the confidence of the Buddha, but you at least have access to the teachings and you're part of a community. And now slowly but surely, as you investigate the teachings more and more, as you spend time with the community, you'll be able to see improvement to the condition of the mind and your confidence in the Buddha will increase. Okay, so this is what the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha is. When someone's asking about taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, what they're talking about is getting protection from the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. And there's some places you can go where they have a certain ceremony that they say that you are now taking refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Well, the Buddha never created this. But Buddha never had any of this stuff. But people have created it after his death, and it's actually promoting wrong view, because any kind of ceremony isn't actually going to produce wisdom. And this can give an individual a false sense of reality, thinking that somehow the Buddha is now going to protect them, or the teachings or the community is now going to protect them, because that's what the word refuge means, is protection. Well, the thing that's going to protect you is your wisdom. That's what's going to protect you. If you have wisdom and you make wise decisions, then you won't experience any harms coming to you because you're making wise decisions. But if you lack wisdom and you're making unwise decisions, it doesn't matter how many ceremonies that you do. If you go out into the world with a lack of wisdom and you're making unwise decisions, there's no protection that you're going to have. There's no ceremony that can produce any kind of protection. So if somebody went through a ceremony thinking that the Buddha, the teachings, and the community are going to somehow protect them based in this ceremony, this can promote wrong view, where the mind doesn't understand that everything that's occurring in the world is based on cause and effect, or action and result. There are certain decisions that are being made. So there is no ceremony to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. Even though if you go to certain temples, and plenty of them will do this, they will have a ceremony for you to do this. But this isn't something that you have to run off and do, because it's not going to produce anything beneficial in the mind. Remember, the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And even though someone might have a shaved hair and they're wearing white clothes, or they're wearing orange robes, or they're wearing something else that looks like a Buddhist monk or a Buddhist teacher, it doesn't mean that they understand the teachings. The Buddha actually gave an analogy on this during his lifetime. He talks about if he was a cow walking through the field in the middle of rainy season and the ground was very soft and he was leaving hoof prints in the soft earth. And then there's a donkey behind him inserting its hooves into the same hoof prints of this cow. And the donkey is thinking, I'm a cow, I'm a cow, I'm a cow. The fact that this donkey is putting its hooves in the same hoof prints as a cow, and it thinks that it's a cow, does that make the donkey a cow? Well, the answer is no. It doesn't make the donkey a cow. So just because someone shaves their hair and they wear a certain color of clothes, it doesn't mean that they understand the teachings or that they're practicing them very closely. So you can go to various temples and various venues that are considered Buddhist, and maybe they're even very popular and very well known in the world, and they might tell you that they have a ceremony for you to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings, and the community. But this isn't actually what the Buddha taught. There's actually people during his lifetime that the Buddha could be traveling from one city to another, and he could just be walking down the road, and somebody would run up to him and they would know that he was the Buddha, and they would beg and plead with him to be able to ordain them because they were interested in being a student of the Buddha. And the Buddha would just basically look at them and say, okay, I'm going to the next town. If you'd like to follow me over there, you can shave your hair and put on a robe there, right? And sometimes he would even just pull over to the side of the street. He's walking, so he would just step off to the side of the street, and the person would shave their hair and put on a robe, and they would just go. No fanfare, no hoopla, no ceremony, none of this kind of stuff. That it was just, okay, you would like to be a student? Okay, shave your hair, put on this robe, and now you can learn with me. So nowadays, there's all kinds of ceremonies, not only to take refuge in the Buddha, the teachings in the community, but even to ordain. There's all kinds of ceremonies that people do. And it's important to understand that this isn't what the Buddha taught, and it's not required in order for you to be able to get to enlightenment. And there's the potential that it's actually promoting wrong view in the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have on this, where you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. So we're going to move on to the next ones. Here with number 6, a question that's frequently asked to people who are teaching and sharing things in the spiritual area is, what is our purpose in life? And what is the purpose of our human existence? Where I share in the book, I talk about various things around this question. One of the things I share is that, in my opinion, this question is coming from the human ego, that the ego thinks that there's some significance or some purpose to this existence, and it's wanting to latch on to some purpose. Some people even call it a higher purpose. And this is where the ego is wanting to have some significance in the world, where what you need to be able to do in order to get to enlightenment is to understand, out of this world, there's 8 billion people. And if you were in an airplane and you look down on the world, it looks like a bunch of ants just running around doing a bunch of activities. But yet the mind wants to think, out of these 8 billion people, that somehow I'm special, and now there must be some purpose or some higher purpose to my life. I've been put here for a purpose. Well, if you look back to prehistoric human beings, I suspect that all they were really interested in is survival. They were probably looking at, what can we eat? What kinds of shelters can we make? Is there any clothes that we can acquire? Can we rub these 2 sticks together and make a fire or something like that? They were just trying to look out for human survival. They weren't thinking about, what is our purpose in this world? It's only been later in human history, like now, that people's lives are so free to be able to go out and do so many different things, that the mind's thinking that there must be some higher purpose. Because during prehistoric times, we were just concerned about having survival and being able to survive. But now we've kind of mastered this. We have all kinds of systems. We have clothing, we have food, we have water, we have shelter, we have all these things that are being done for us, and we can kind of create our life where we don't have to be concerned about those kinds of things, because they're provided. As long as we work and we have relationships with people, we have these things readily available to us. And we've mastered these things so well that we have all this extra time in our life. So much so that some of us insert unbeneficial things into our life, where we might just spend hour upon hour upon hour looking at YouTube videos or playing games or searching social media. Now, some of those things can be helpful if you do them in moderation and you balance your life, but if you do them excessively, this is where it's taking away from your ability to actually accomplish things in your life and move your life forward. But because we've mastered all these systems and we're easily able to get food and clothing and shelter and things like this, we have all this extra time, and we kind of look around and like, what's the purpose of this life, right? Because you basically go to work, you spend time with some people, you eat, you come home, you kind of spend some time around doing those kinds of things, right? You might wash the body, you might comb your hair, you might get some food, brush your teeth, things like this. And you just kind of think about, well, what's the real purpose to all of this? Well, what I would say is there is no purpose, right? There is no purpose to anything here. There's nothing here for you. Train your mind to be willing to let go of this mundane life that exists on this planet. And then as you choose to do that, your mind will actually be able to move into enlightenment, because you let go of the world and wanting to be in the world. And as you get to enlightenment, that's where life becomes very enjoyable, because you're not being upset and angry and frustrated any longer. So even though I share that there is no purpose to this life, oftentimes that's not very satisfying to people. People want to have some purpose. So what I share in this book on this particular topic, I say, okay, if you would like to have some kind of purpose in life, make your purpose to attain enlightenment. If that's what you would need and you need a real purpose in your life, make that your purpose, so that by attaining enlightenment, you can eliminate the ego and you can eliminate the desire and the longing, the yearning for some kind of purpose in life. And you can eliminate continuing to come back into this world over and over and over again. So if you want a real purpose, make your purpose in life to attain enlightenment. Because as you're training your mind and you have some level of development of your mind, then you're actually able to move your life forward and you can see all parts of your life really blossoming and really improving. Because of course you're going to need to have some kind of occupation, you're going to have friends, you're going to have hobbies, you're going to have activities, you're going to have all kinds of fun and enjoyment at different parts of your life. But you need to have some level of dedication to being able to actually learn and practice to be able to get to enlightenment. And that's what's going to make everything about this life so much better. Another question that's oftentimes asked is, can I exercise the physical body and still attain enlightenment? The short answer is yes, absolutely. In fact, it's very wise to exercise, to have some moderate exercise. It's going to produce better health in the body. It's not the activity itself that's going to determine whether you do get to enlightenment or you don't. It's about ensuring that the mind isn't attached to physical exercise. So for example, if you have a rigid schedule that Monday through Friday at 8 a.m., you're going to exercise every single day. Well, you can't do that. It's not going to be possible because of the universal truth of impermanence. You're going to miss a day. Whereas if you have a craving, desire, attachment to meditate at 8 a.m. every single day, when you get that, you'll be happy. But when you don't get it, you'll be sad or grumpy or irritable. And now you might walk around thinking that it's biological that you're grumpy and irritable. You might think that because biologically you didn't exercise, that somehow that grumpiness is associated with that. But actually what's causing that irritability is that the mind is craving, it's longing, it's yearning, it's attached to this exercise. And because the mind didn't get what it wants, it's experiencing this grumpiness and this irritability. So if you're going to exercise, wonderful, but just be sure you're not attached to it and you're not longing and yearning and you're not using missing exercise as an excuse or justification for being grumpy or irritable. Another thing about exercising is that if you exercise, it's important not to have conceit. Sometimes conceit can sneak into the mind if you're youthful, if you have a certain shape, if you have certain health or a certain physique. You might look out at others who aren't exercising or who don't look as healthy, and you might look down on them and think that they're less of a person. And if you're doing this, this is going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. It's not the exercising that's hindering you from getting to enlightenment. It's the conceit involved in actually looking down on people and being arrogant and boastful and prideful about the fact that you exercise and others don't. Sometimes people ask, is medicine and medical procedures for the body an attachment? Well, the answer is it can be, but it doesn't have to be, right? It's not the medicine, it's not the medical procedure, it's not the object itself that is the attachment. It's how the mind is relating to this particular thing. So for example, an individual could have a nose surgery because maybe they're having difficulty breathing, and maybe they have a deviated septum and it's blocking their nose and they have difficulty breathing. So they're interested in getting a medical procedure in order to correct the nose so they can get a better inhale and exhale, they can get better breath in and out of the body. And then there could be another person who's interested in getting a nose surgery as well, but they're doing it for cosmetic reasons because they want their nose to look a certain way and they're not content and they're not happy with the way that it actually looks as its natural nose. Well, the first situation, this isn't an attachment. The person needs to adjust the nose in order to get a better breathing in and out of the body. But the second person, they're having a craving, desire, attachment. They're not satisfied with how the nose looks, and they want to actually change the nose in order to be able to have it appear a certain way. Whether that person chooses to do that or not, it's up to them. They can choose to do that if they like. It's their practice. They can choose to do it. But in that situation, the medical procedure is an attachment. And you can have the same thing with medicines, right? The medicine can be for health benefits, and this is what you're using it for. And then when you're done with the medicine, it's done, it's over with, and you stop taking it. But you could also have a medicine that becomes addictive, and you start craving and desiring it and longing, yearning for it, and you're taking it habitually even though you don't need it as part of your health. So it's not the medicine and the medical procedure itself, it's how the mind is holding on to these things or not, which determines whether it's an attachment. Sometimes people ask me, what significance can I apply to dreams? Well, the answer is none. Right? Like if you have a particular dream and you're trying to find some significance to it, this is the mind looking and peering into your dreams, and there's almost an auspicious and superstitious way of kind of looking at these things. What I encourage you to do is when you have a dream, just think about it as, okay, it's a dream. It's not true reality. Look at how creative the mind can be. And then when you wake up, just understand it's not true reality. Cut it off, let it go, and walk away from it. That it isn't actually true reality. You're going to have to let it go. Whereas if your mind holds on to this dream, it can actually affect you throughout your day. It can affect the condition of the mind. So you could talk to 3, 4, 5, 10 different dream interpreters, and you'll probably get a different interpretation of your dream every single time. That's not what this path is about. It's about interpreting your dreams. Are you going to get rich, or is your boyfriend or girlfriend going to come back to you? That's not what this is all about. But one thing that you can do with dreams is that, let's just say you're having a regular recurring dream of dying. And when you wake up, you're scared and you're fearful. Well, you can use that as insight, because you can see that your mind is still craving and clinging and holding on to the world, and this is something that you're going to need to let go of. Or say that you're having a regular recurring dream of a boyfriend or girlfriend from the past. This can show you that your mind hasn't quite let go of this individual. It's still holding on. So this can give you insight to what's going on in the mind, but then you're going to need to take action in order to eliminate those cravings, desires, attachments in your day-to-day life. Right? So this is how you can approach dreams. Sometimes people ask me, why is enlightenment permanent? Because they learn about the universal truth of impermanence, and they're a little bit confused of why is enlightenment permanent. Well, when I teach the universal truth of impermanence, I share that everything in the world is impermanent, meaning everything you can see, everything you can hear, everything you smell, everything you taste, everything that comes in contact with the body, and then anything that goes through the mind in terms of thoughts and ideas and things like this. This is all impermanent. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. These are called conditioned objects, that they arise, they change, and they fade away. And when the mind is in the unenlightened state, you're experiencing conditional feelings that based on some condition, you're going to experience happiness, excitement, elation, those pleasant feelings, or based on some condition, you're going to experience the painful feelings, sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, and all those others. Or you might experience the neither painful nor pleasant feelings. And those are based on some condition. There's pollution in the mind, and now the mind is forming its inner feelings on some condition. That if it's sunny outside, you'll get so happy. But then when it rains, you'll be sad or frustrated. Or if your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy. But then when it goes down, you'll be sad or frustrated. This is what the unenlightened mind does, that it's forming its inner feelings based on some condition. Well, by the time you get to enlightenment, you've purified the mind, that these conditions no longer exist in your mind. You've purified the mind of the 10 fetters. Your mind is now unconditioned. So where the Buddha describes that conditioned objects, they arise, change, and fade away, unconditioned objects, they do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. So the qualities of the enlightened mind, the peace, the calm, the serenity, the contentedness, the joy, and all those other qualities like the focus, concentration, clarity, the deep memory, all those other things, these qualities are being experienced because you've purified the mind. You've gotten rid of the pollutions. So now the natural state of the mind is enlightened, where it just naturally is experiencing enlightenment. There isn't any cause and condition that is producing it. Instead, it's because you've eliminated the causes and conditions that produce the up and down and up and down, that now that you've eliminated those, now the mind can be stable and steady, and it's a permanent mental state. That once the mind is experiencing this peace and joy, it will never again go back to experiencing anger and sadness and frustration. It's humanly impossible for an enlightened being to ever experience anger and frustration and sadness and any of these other discontent feelings. Once you've eliminated the pollutions, the 10 fetters, they will never come back again. It's impossible for them to actually come back in. The mind is fully protected at that point. So this is why enlightenment is permanent, is because the mind is no longer conditioned, where it's experiencing a rising, changing, and fading away. It's now unconditioned, that there isn't an arising, there isn't a changing, there isn't a fading away. The peace and the joy is just always there in the mind. And then lastly, one of the frequently asked questions that are sometimes asked is, why are donations of support for teachers of Gotama Buddha's teachings so important? Well, the first aspect of this is that it helps the continued sharing of the teachings in the world so that countless people can learn and practice and be able to get to enlightenment. If it wasn't for practicing generosity to help the teachings continue in the world, then people wouldn't have access to them. And the world would just become a darker and darker and more miserable and horrible place to live for everybody. So by sharing generosity with financial support, this is going to help the teachings of the Buddha continue to exist in the world for you and for all the generations in the future. All the teachings that we're learning, everything that you're being exposed to, this is some kind of donation or some kind of support that has been happening ever since the life of the Buddha 2,500 years ago. What's been put into motion is this constant generosity where over 2,500 years, people have been sharing, whether it's their land or their financial resources or their time or their effort, their energy, everything that you see, like the microphone that I'm using right now, the lights that I'm using, the clothes that I'm wearing, all of these things have been donated by somebody at some point that they were interested in seeing the teachings continue in the world. So that's the first reason why it's important to support the teachings, is that they can continue in the world. The second reason is that by practicing generosity, it leads to your enlightenment, because the cause of discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment, the selfishness, the mind holding on and wanting things to be permanent. And the way that you transform that is, one, through breathing mindfulness meditation, that meditation that we just did and that you guys have been learning throughout this program. The goal isn't to eliminate your thoughts. The goal is to notice the thoughts sooner and sooner so that you're developing mindfulness and concentration, and to be able to let them go easier and easier. Because when you hold on to things, you're going to get discontent. If you think back to that boyfriend or girlfriend when you guys broke up, when you held on to that relationship, even when you guys broke up, when you were holding on and holding on and holding on, you were angry, you were mad, you were frustrated. You might have been lonely or bored. You might have been missing this person. But at some point, you decided, you know what? If she wants to be with somebody else, so be it. Let her be with someone else. Or if he wants to be with somebody else, or he wants to move across to another part of the country, so be it. And your mind let go. And that's where you gained your peacefulness. So a mind that has craving, desire, attachment, and the mind's holding on, it will experience discontentedness over and over and over again. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to let go, as well as practicing generosity. That's training your mind to let go. So we were all taught as children pretty much to give and share. And we were taught to share our toys and share our food and things like that. But as we age and we start working and we start applying our effort to certain things, we start wanting things to be fulfilling for ourselves. We think that if we are going to spend 3 hours doing something, I want this in return. Or if I spend 2 days doing this, I want this in return. The mind becomes selfish. But what the Buddha is teaching you to do is to train your mind to live open-handedly, where you don't have this selfishness. And that's where generosity comes in. So for me, you will always see that everything that I teach is always available at no cost. The classes, courses, retreats, the books, the personal guidance, the videos, podcast, audiobooks, all this stuff is available to students at no cost, because it's very important to share the teachings in the world so that the widest audience possible can get access to them. If I put a price tag on this group learning program where it's $2,000 to be able to take this program, right away, the most disadvantaged people who actually need the teachings the most wouldn't be able to get access to them because they can't afford that $2,000. So by having a price tag on a class, it's basically blocking out people that actually need the teachings the most, and now they stay stuck. Right? But there's people in the world that do support me. They don't necessarily give me $2,000, but they share with me, and there's people who share, and then that allows me to be able to then share these teachings with everybody and anybody. I never have an expectation that a person will give me anything. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm just giving to the students, and I just give and give and give and give. And I know that if I continue to share these teachings, that people in the world will learn them, people will get to enlightenment and more. If people are interested in supporting the teachings, then they might choose to do that. But I never have an expectation of that. My support and my interest to help you isn't based on whether someone makes an offering or not. But just know that making offerings to support these teachings, it does help them to continue in the world, and it also helps you to get closer to enlightenment because it's training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. And this is one of the reasons why I don't put a price tag on the classes, because then students wouldn't be able to practice generosity. They wouldn't be able to actually get to enlightenment because they're paying a price for a service. I paid this and now I want this in return. But instead, you guys can just see that somebody's practicing generosity. I'm just willing to share without any expectation of anything in return. And then if at some point somebody would like to share with me, they're more than welcome to do that. And it's up to each individual to choose whether or not they're going to do that or not. But these are the two reasons why it's helpful and it's important to be able to share the teachings, not just with me, but to be able to share donations with other teachers as well, so that the teachings can continue to flourish in the world. So let me know if you guys have any questions on anything that I shared here on these particular frequently asked questions. Okay, it looks like Yusuf has a question here. How to donate for you, and is possible to donate without the company that is helping me donate to you knowing your name, because I'm not interested in them knowing to whom I'm donating. So I have multiple different ways that people can donate. If you go to our website in buddhadailywisdom.com, there's a link for support us. And if you go there, you can use PayPal, which some people have a PayPal account. PayPal also will accept bank cards. There's also transfers that you can do with bank accounts and things like this. So you can see it all on the support us page. And if one of those things work for you, you should be able to find something there like Venmo or Wise, or even just a bank transfer. There's all different options there that should be able to work for just about anybody. But if there's ever some new thing that I'm not aware of, you guys are always welcome to recommend that to me. But I've put a whole plethora of options out there thinking that you would be able to find something that works for you. Okay, so it looks like Vibhav, you have a question. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I had a question on the first point, and you said when people ask you what their purpose in life is, and you said that I guess you're trying to say that there's no real purpose, but you can make the purpose to attain enlightenment.
Yes.
It should not. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, because the ego is in there wanting there to be some purpose. Like, what's my higher purpose in this world? This is the ego wanting to take on some kind of significance. So what I say in the book is I teach people that there's nothing here for you. Let go of this world. There is no purpose. Let go and move on so that the mind can get to enlightenment. But then you'll see if you read the book that I say, this is probably unsatisfying for a lot of people when they read this. So therefore, if you really truly are interested in a purpose, make your purpose to get to enlightenment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Let me check our other platforms and see if we have any questions. I don't see anything anywhere. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you how to determine if you've actually attained enlightenment. And this is all the way at the back of the book for a reason, because somebody would have had to at least learn the first book, but they would need to learn all the others too in order to actually get to enlightenment. There's nobody that's going to get to enlightenment within 7 months. It's just not possible. But it's helpful to know how to determine if you've attained enlightenment. Well, the first thing to know is that if someone's attained enlightenment, they will never stop practicing the teachings. And the reason why is because their mind has essentially been upgraded to this new operating system. You can think about the unenlightened mind like an old archaic computer system. It's like the unenlightened 1.0. And you're making these incremental upgrades until you get to enlightened 9.0. And once you're up and running on that new software in your mind, you can't ever delete it. You've seen too much truth. It's not possible. So if you've gotten to the point where you never lie and you never use harsh speech with people, and you see that all your relationships have become so peaceful and so joyful, you will never again be able to lie. You will physically not be able to use harsh speech ever again. Even if somebody was holding a gun up to your head, you wouldn't be able to use harsh speech and you wouldn't be able to lie. You would never stop practicing the teachings because your mind just isn't capable of doing that anymore because you've completely transformed it and you've seen the truth and you've seen things too clearly. The second thing is you'll be fully practicing the Eightfold Path, which includes the Four Noble Truths and the 5 precepts. That the Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. You would be practicing that thoroughly because that's the new operating system that you're upgraded your mind to, and you'll be fully practicing that. And you would have needed to been practicing that for multiple years before the mind actually gets to enlightenment. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll actually be fully practicing that. When you've attained enlightenment as an arahant, you will have eliminated all the 10 fetters. So you will know what all the 10 fetters are, you'll know what the symptoms of them are, you will know how to eliminate them, and you will know how to determine whether you've eliminated them or not. This is a retreat that I teach once a year here in Chiang Mai, and it's live streamed throughout the world to teach you in detail about each one of the fetters. There's other classes and courses and retreats that I teach and introduce you guys to these things, but it's this retreat in August that I teach all the details about the actual individual 10 fetters. So an individual who's enlightened would have fully eradicated the 10 fetters from the mind. It would be completely purified. You will have cultivated a mind that is completely practicing the Brahma Viharas. If you remember back to chapter 14, that's where I taught the Brahma Viharas. These are 4 healthy mental states: loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. You would be fully practicing these because loving kindness is the antidote to anger, hatred, and ill will. Compassion is the antidote to indifference about the world, or the longing, yearning, the craving for the world, because compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, where what sometimes the mind does in the unenlightened state is you have a craving for the world to be a certain way. Or you're all the way on the other side and you're indifferent and you could care less about the world. But the middle way is compassion, where you have concern for the misfortune of others, right? And this loving kindness is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. That's the exact opposite of anger, hatred, and ill will. The sympathetic joy is joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. This is the remedy to jealousy and envy. So if you have jealousy and envy in the mind, it's just that you haven't fully brought sympathetic joy to full perfection and full development. And then there's equanimity, which is calmness and composure, evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. This is the remedy to a mind that's being shaken up. So for example, if you got a phone call that your mom has been in a terrible car accident and she's being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, if you get that call, if you're attached to your mom, you might be shaken up by that. And your mind might want to hurry up and grab your keys and run out the door. Well, if you did this, you could potentially get into a car accident yourself going across town. But at the very least, when you show up to the hospital, your mind's going to be shaken up and you're not going to be able to actually talk with the doctors and nurses to make wise decisions to be able to help your mom. So by the time somebody's enlightened, they will have been practicing equanimity long before they're even enlightened. When they're in the jhanas, they're going to be practicing equanimity, where they have calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations. They won't be shaken up in those situations because they understand it's unwise to rush across town and rush to the hospital. Instead, you would take your time, you would get there in a reasonable amount of time, and then your mind's calm and composed, and you can talk to the doctors and nurses, you can find out what's going on, and now you can make wise decisions to be able to help your mom. It doesn't actually help her for you to rush across town. So by the time somebody's enlightened, they're going to be practicing the Brahma Viharas to perfection. Loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, because this is remedying certain issues in the mind. Then an individual will be practicing the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment are to lift your mind up out of the sluggish, dull, complacent, lethargic condition where there's a lack of willingness to do something. It lifts it up out of that and brings it to the middle. But then also, if your mind's excited or overactive, it'll bring the mind down into the middle where there's tranquility and concentration and equanimity. So the 7 factors of enlightenment are actually a tool to fine-tune the mind. It's not to determine whether you are enlightened or you aren't enlightened. It's actually a tool to fine-tune the mind. And the first one is mindfulness, where you use your awareness of mind to determine whether your mind is sluggish or whether it's excited. And then you implement the appropriate factors of enlightenment to bring it to the middle. So if your mind is sluggish and lethargic, you're going to implement the enlightenment factor of investigation, energy, and joy. You're going to need to arise that through right effort. If your mind's overactive, then you're going to need to bring in the tranquility, the concentration, and the equanimity. And that's what's going to bring it to the middle. And the more and more that you keep your mind in the middle like this, the more that your mind will stay there. It's that analogy that I use with the piece of wood and the steel rod, and you grind that back and forth, that if you do that long enough, your mind will just always stay in the middle. But initially, your rod's going to bounce around because there's no groove there in the wood. So the 7 factors of enlightenment are there to uplift the mind out of the sluggish condition and to bring it down out of the overactive condition. So you would be practicing these 7 factors of enlightenment effortlessly by the time you get to enlightenment. And then lastly, the ultimate way to know that you've actually attained enlightenment is that you'll no longer be experiencing any discontentedness. You will eliminate 100% of all discontentedness. All the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, even the slightest displeasure is eliminated from the enlightened mind. And you'll know that you've accomplished this because it'll be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. You won't have any discontentedness whatsoever during this period of time, and you'll know that your mind has attained enlightenment. But I don't suggest that you ever convince yourself that you've actually attained enlightenment. Instead, just stay dedicated, determined, and diligent, because you've cultivated a lot of wisdom to get to this point where you've eliminated all your discontentedness. That wisdom has led to the most important thing that you've ever experienced, which is the complete eradication of discontentedness. And you're not going to just stop cultivating wisdom because you've gotten to enlightenment. At that point, you will have seen the benefit of wisdom, and you will look for other parts of your life that you can cultivate wisdom. Maybe you're interested in learning how to fly a helicopter, or maybe you're interested in being a computer repair person, or maybe a camera technician or something like this. And you can cultivate wisdom about these kinds of things because now your mind is functioning optimally. There isn't anything that you can't accomplish. By the time your mind gets to enlightenment, your mind is performing optimally. You can do anything and everything that you'd ever be interested in doing. So you've eliminated discontentedness at this point, and all your relationships will be at ease. So this is how you can determine whether your mind has actually attained enlightenment. So are there any questions here about how to determine if you've attained enlightenment? So it looks like Kristen has a question. David, when does the new group learning cycle start? It starts on the 20th of October. It's 2 weeks from now, so it'll start then. And I'm going to be doing the same things, which is 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And it's going to start on a Sunday on the 20th. But if you're attending, say, Saturday night, because I think you're in North America, if you're attending Saturday night, that'll be the 19th, right? So it'll be 9 a.m. Sunday morning Thai time and 9 p.m. Sunday evening. Then Yusuf is asking a question. I'm not sure if this is related to number 6. I'm curious about how humans have the ability to talk. So what is the purpose of having conversations? Yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about there, Yusuf. The purpose of conversations is to communicate and understand other people's thoughts and also to communicate your thoughts, but I'm not quite sure what you're looking at there. Yusuf is asking another question. How did the Buddha know he is enlightened? Because of what I just shared, right? That you would have eliminated 100% of your discontentedness. So the Buddha knew what it was like to be angry and sad and frustrated and all these other discontent feelings. And having eliminated all of that and having the complete transformation of the mind, where the mind is calm and peaceful and joyful, you'll know that. You'll know that you've actually attained enlightenment. The Buddha even talks about this. He says that when a person gets to enlightenment, they will know that they've attained enlightenment. But as I just shared with you, I don't suggest that you ever convince yourself that you've attained enlightenment. Because one of the things that'll happen is you'll go 3 months or maybe 6 months without any discontentedness whatsoever. You'll think that you're actually enlightened. And next thing you know, there'll be some little residual clinging or craving that's in the mind, and you'll experience like 30 seconds or maybe 2 minutes of discontentedness, and you'll miss it. You'll think the game's over, and you'll miss it. It's kind of like that game Whack-A-Mole, if you know that game, where the moles are popping their heads up, and you're standing there with the mallet, right? These fetters are popping their heads up. This pollution is popping their heads up. And if you never think that the game is over, you can whack those moles as soon as they pop up. But if you think that the game's over and you're just sitting there lackadaisical, they'll pop their heads up and you won't actually see them and you won't spot them. So if you think the game's over and you're enlightened, when you get this little bit of a fetter coming up, you'll miss it and it will creep in your mind, and now you won't be able to eradicate it. So if you never convince yourself that you're enlightened, even when it's been 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, and there's no discontentedness, just never convince yourself that you're enlightened. There's no need to. Just enjoy the peaceful and joyful mental state and go out in the world and do wonderful and amazing things. Okay, so knows immediately, or one should wait months? Years. You should wait years. There's not a situation where 1 second ago you were unenlightened and now 1 second later you know that you're enlightened. It's not a light switch. That these qualities of enlightenment are gradually increasing. In the unenlightened mind, those aspects of the mind are gradually decreasing. So it's not like 1 second ago you were unenlightened and now a second later you're enlightened. It's not like a light switch. It's a gradual progression. So even you go 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and there's no discontentedness whatsoever, never convince yourself that you're enlightened. You can go 2, 3, even 6 months with no discontentedness. In that third stage of enlightenment, you'll see that it'd be 3 months or 6 months, there's no discontentedness whatsoever. And then boom, you're going to get a little discontentedness. It's not fierce, it's not strong, it's very infrequent, it's very insignificant. It can last as short as 5 seconds. And you'll stomp it out of the mind right away. And you're going to need to look and you're going to need to see what's the craving that produced that. Whereas if you think game's over, then you're not going to be able to spot that. So it's better to never convince yourself that you're actually enlightened. Here's another question from Yusuf. What about when people say, I had a dramatic enlightenment experience? They feel it. It's not true. Enlightenment's not instantaneous. This is one of the things that people are misunderstanding. You can have realizations, you can have shifts in your mind where you can actually notice these shifts. But if you talk to those people that think that they're actually enlightened and they think that enlightenment is instantaneous, ask them, what feelings do you struggle with the most? Do you struggle with anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, stress, or anxiety? What are the feelings that you struggle with the most? And they're going to tell you. They're going to say, oh, I struggle with anxiety, or I struggle with stress. And there you know that they're not enlightened. So there's people walking around the world that think that they're enlightened, but they're actually not enlightened. Right? So there's some people that will tell you that enlightened beings still experience discontent feelings. And I can assure you that they don't. So the people that are describing enlightenment as sudden and instantaneous, they're actually not experiencing enlightenment. They've experienced a certain shift or a certain realization in the mind where it has this dramatic shift, but the mind actually isn't enlightened yet. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. All right, so here's some questions coming in on YouTube. Let's see. It says, if I have purpose, for example, want to be a millionaire, can I still get to enlightenment? If you want anything at all, the mind is not yet enlightened. That's the longing, yearning. If you're indifferent and you could care less about what's happening in your life, you're not going to be able to get to enlightenment there either. So you need to come to the middle where you gradually work towards a certain goal or objective or interest. And if your goal is to increase your income, wonderful, that can help you, because then you can acquire certain things that you need. But it's not this outside thing. It's not becoming a millionaire that's going to make you happy. Instead, it's letting go of that longing, yearning, and wanting some external thing. So it's not money that's going to produce happiness, but also having money isn't going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. An enlightened being could be rich, and they could even be famous. Those things aren't what's going to determine whether you're enlightened or not. It's whether the mind's holding on and clinging to these things and chasing after it. So if you're chasing after being a millionaire, you won't actually get to enlightenment. But if you throttle that back and you restrain the mind and you gradually work towards your goals, objectives, or interests, you might become a millionaire, and you can actually have experienced enlightenment as well, because the mind is no longer experiencing discontentedness. You don't form your inner feelings based on this money. So the money isn't the problem. It's the longing, the yearning for it, and forming your inner feelings based on this money. That's what's going to cause the issues in your life. Okay, it looks like Yihang has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I was thinking about how would you, or maybe could you please perhaps share how are you making sure that you eliminate the attachment to your close, really, really close loved ones, for example, like your son? Because I feel like before you shared, we can have this contemplation in the mind of the loved ones dying. And the more times we're doing that, the more the mind is being peaceful. But sometimes I feel like maybe how many times we're doing this is still what's happening in our mind. And then what is happening, if the death is really, truly, physically happening in front of us, might still have a different shocking impact that. So I'm not sure how would you making sure to really eliminate those attachment to really close loved ones.
Okay. Is your question about how to eliminate your attachment, or is it how to know that you've actually eliminated it?
How to know that you have.
Okay. And is your question related to me specifically and my personal experience with my son?
I would be a bit curious to know if it's possible. Actually, I thought about this question because recently I visited one of my friends who just had a newborn baby.
Mm-hmm.
And that day, the baby was acting all the time normal. And I was also thinking I didn't think too much. I was just trying to eliminate all the happiness or frustration when the baby cries or laugh. I just think it's maybe it's a good practice to do. And then suddenly, at the moment, the baby just stopped weird, stop acting of anything. It's like she was in they call what do you call the baby wagon, the cart. And then the baby just opened the eye, but didn't do anything, just stopped doing anything. Looks like that, for a long few seconds. And me and her mom was getting a bit shocked also. I was like, that looks like a real death in front of me, and it feels really shocking. And it's even a baby I just seen not many times. I don't feel like I have that much attachment to her, so I'm not sure if there is a difference if it's just imagining death in the mind or just really seeing the baby or seeing the real loved ones dying in front of us.
Okay. The way that you'll know you've eliminated an attachment to an individual person is you won't be putting your expectations on that person and trying to control them. When you're away from that person, you won't miss them, right? Like that feeling of like, oh, I miss that person and I really want to be with them and I can't feel content and peaceful and happy and joyful without them. That's how you'll know. If the person gets injured or they're sick or something like that, your mind won't be shaken up. So for example, like one time my son fell down rollerblading and he didn't have a helmet. And I was with some students actually, and they came to me and they said, hey, your son just took a really bad spill and he didn't have a helmet on. And I said, oh, okay, thanks for letting me know. And I just finished up what I had to say to this other student. And then I was talking for a little bit, and then they came back over to me. They said, hey, I really need to let you know that your son fell down and he hasn't gotten up yet. And he's actually still laying on the ground. And I said, oh, okay. And then I calmly made my way over to where he's at. And then I asked him, hey, what's going on? How you doing? I was just completely calm and collected and practicing equanimity. And then ultimately we ended up taking him to the hospital because he started vomiting about maybe 20 or 30 minutes later. When we were in the car, he was vomiting. So I needed to take him to the hospital. So I just calmly took him to the hospital, calmly took care of that. And recently he had a toe infection and he needed to have a little minor surgery. So you can see in these situations that your mind's completely calm and completely content. And when you go away from your family, like I just went away to Mexico, my mind was completely peaceful. I didn't miss my son. I wasn't worried about him or anything like that. So this is some of the ways that you'll know that you've eliminated your attachment, that your mind won't be shaken up about these kinds of situations.
Okay. I think I got to know a little bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. It looks like David is asking a question on Facebook. Going back to the example of the cardboard box and the box disintegrating, the soul or the aspect that continues on and looks for another box. Then I thought you said that the new box already is full with previous experiences. Can you explain more? Sure. So there isn't a soul that the Buddha describes as going from one life to a next. This is what reincarnation explains, but this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. Even though people are attributing reincarnation to the teachings of the Buddha, he never taught that there is a soul or there isn't a soul. But people will describe it that way, but that's not what the Buddha actually taught. Instead, he taught that there's these cravings and residual memories in your mind. And these cravings and residual memories are essentially like the contents in the cardboard box. And that's what's moving on, is the contents. The cravings and the residual memories are moving into the new cardboard box. But it's a completely brand new cardboard box every single time. It's not the same cardboard box. There's nothing that's the same. It's just that the cravings and residual memories are moving forward into this new cardboard box. So the way to say this is like there's one mind and then there's a second mind, and the cravings and residual memories move from one mind to the other. And that's how an individual is reborn. Essentially, if there's cravings in the mind at the time of death, this is the fuel that causes rebirth. The way that you can think about this, another analogy, is if you have a fire and it's got logs on the fire, the logs are the fuel. And as long as this fire has logs, it's going to send off sparks. Right? As long as this fire has fuel, it's going to send off sparks. And now when these sparks get carried by the wind, it's going to land and it's going to ignite a new fire. That fire hasn't been reborn. It's a completely new fire, right? It's just coming from the spark of the previous fire. So the same thing is true about the mind in this new existence, is that there's craving and residual memories in the mind, and those cravings are the spark that is now causing this new mind to be created. And now the cravings and residual memories are inside this new mind. And that's how another being comes into the world. That now with the mind existing, it's got to find a body in order to exist in the world. Okay, so that's some information for you there. Okay, Yusuf, you have a question? Go ahead, sir.
There is a common saying that the wife of the Buddha was reborn with him in more than 500 lifetimes. Is this true or not? Is there a way to know if, like, someone like maybe your son was reborn with you, like maybe a member of your family for more than once? Because I had some doubt. A girl next to me that I sense that I know him, I know her, even though that I have never talked to her. If it's like attachment, or maybe it is a real sense that maybe we were born together more than once, maybe as a family member or something.
Did you say, is it true that the Buddha was reborn 500 times, or that his wife was reborn 500 times?
They were reborn together maybe as a family member or as a loved ones, more than 500 times.
Okay.
And people say it is because of how amount of love they have for each other or something.
Okay, so this doesn't appear in the original teachings of the Buddha at all. It's not in the Pali Canon that I've seen. So if this is being shared, this is something that is being shared as hearsay, or just one person to the next. It's not actually based in independently verifiable evidence in the Pali Canon that I've ever seen. So that part of it isn't actually documented in the Pali Canon. But the Buddha does describe that if there are members of your life, people in your life that you have a good relationship with and you have a fond relationship with, if you guys are reborn, you will be reborn together in a future life, but not necessarily in the same role. You can actually be reborn in different roles. So let's just say you're husband and wife in this life and you're very endearing to each other, and now you're reborn into a future life. Well, you might be the mother and someone else might be your child, or might be a brother and sister or something like this in a future life. So these are things that can occur, but it was never documented in the teachings of the Buddha about him and his wife existing in that way.
What about me sensing that I know someone even though I have never talked to them? Is it like kind of attachment, or maybe something that's possible to happen?
It could be either way. It could be that there's an attachment there and your mind is longing, yearning, and you're kind of attributing it to, oh, I knew this person in a past life. Or it actually could be that you actually knew this person in a past life. It really doesn't matter at this point. If it's an attachment, it matters because you need to eliminate that. But whether they were in your past life or not, it really doesn't matter, because now it's a completely new life and you're different beings, and you need to be able to decide to start over, or you're not going to have a relationship, or whatever it is. So sometimes people put a lot of significance on these kinds of things. It's really unwise to try to tell other people, oh, you were this in my past life, or like you were just asking me, like, can I tell the past lives that my son has had? Even if I understood past lives that my son has had, it would be very unwise for me to tell him that. Because if somebody's going to observe their past lives, they need to be able to see it for themselves. It can really mess some people up if somebody enters into your life and says, oh, you were this being in the past. Well, if that's true, that person needs to be able to figure that out for themselves. Having somebody else tell you that you were that being actually can really mess with your mind. And there's certain Buddhist traditions that actually do this. They will actually go around and they will actually tell people who they think that they are. They will try to identify you. And this is very dangerous, to try to tell somebody else that you think they were this person or that person in a past life. If that person is going to see their past lives and observe that, then they need to be able to do that on their own, and then they can have confidence in that. But if somebody else tells you that you were this person, you can't ever have confidence. And I've seen people's mind really experience difficulties and troubles when they're being told these kinds of things. So it's very unwise to talk about those kinds of things. Just know it for yourself and just move on.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to check to see if we have any more questions anywhere. Okay, so let me just share a few things to kind of wrap up this additional content at the end of the book. And these are kind of things that I'm just putting in the group learning program. It's actually not in the book itself. This one actually is in the book, but there's some other things here that I have to share that aren't actually in the book. These are some of the words of the Buddha as he's getting closer and closer to death. He says to his ordained practitioners, he says, "Wander forth, O monks, for the welfare of the multitude, for the peacefulness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the good welfare and peacefulness of heavenly beings and humans. Teach, O monks, the teachings that are good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing. Reveal the perfectly complete and purified holy life. There are beings with little dust in their eyes, who are falling away because they do not hear the teachings. There will be those who will understand the teachings. So this is one of the reasons why I do what I do and why I teach what I teach, out of compassion for the world, concern for the misfortune of others. And I know that sharing the teachings is the very best thing that I could ever do with my life, because it's going to lead to your peacefulness. If you learn and practice the teachings, this can lead to your welfare and your peacefulness for a very long time. And perhaps what you've been able to see with this program is what I've attempted to do is make it good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing. It's really important to use the accurate wording and phrasing to be able to describe the teachings. If we don't have our wording and phrasing accurate, then the students aren't going to be able to understand this. So what I've attempted to do is reveal this holy life to you, this purified life where you can purify the mind and experience this enlightened mental state. There are beings with very little pollution in their mind, very little dust in their eyes, is the way that the Buddha is describing it. And because people don't hear the teachings, they're falling away into discontentedness and into unwholesome things. But there are those people who understand. There's some people who will understand. If you remember back to the beginning of the group learning program, there might have been 20 or 30 people, I don't remember how many at the beginning of the program, but slowly over time, that's kind of waned, right? Because people sometimes see the teachings and they don't necessarily understand them, and they don't put the effort and the energy to understand them. But if you're understanding the teachings, you can get to the point where the more and more you understand them and practice them, you'll see more and more peacefulness coming into your mind. And not everybody's going to understand the teachings. So when I restart this program coming up in 2 weeks, there'll be a lot of people that is restarting potentially. Maybe there will, maybe there won't. But over time, that'll gradually fade away, because people oftentimes aren't necessarily willing to put in the work to have the dedication and diligence to learn and practice. But if you're willing to put in that work, you'll actually see the results. Each of these kinds of programs that you do in the world, it's just like everything else, that what you put into it is what you get out of it. So if you've been reading the book, if you've been attending the classes, if you've been meditating, if you've been getting some personal guidance here and there, asking questions, then you've definitely gotten a lot out of this program. And you might decide that you'd like to repeat it and do it again. Or you might decide that you'd like to repeat it and actually do the Pali Canon and English study group as well, because you can start that Pali Canon and English study group at any point that you like. Even though we restart it once every year and a half, you can actually start it at any point that you'd like. So these are some of the words of the Buddha as he was getting closer and closer to death. This is something that I put at the very end of the book, and I put this in there long before there were any wars going on in terms of what we see now today in Israel and Ukraine and things like this. As I said, the only war worth waging is the war within the mind. Win that war and you will have won everything. Because sometimes those thoughts that you have in your mind, it can almost be like a war. It can almost be like you're at war with yourself. But if you win that war, you will have won everything, because the mind will be so peaceful and so joyful. And that's truly the only war worth waging. I've never seen an actual war that has produced beneficial results. Every time there's ever been a war, there's nothing but killing and destruction. So what I'm sharing here is that there's no war worth waging except for the one that's within your own mind. And if you can win that one, you've won everything. Here's some words from the Buddha as he was getting close to death. He says, "One who sees the teachings sees me. One who sees me sees the teachings." He says this in response to one of his students, because the Buddha was describing to his students that he was going to be dying soon. And one of his students was begging and pleading with him not to die. And the Buddha says, you don't need me. You don't need this physical body to be here any longer. Because if you see the teachings, you see me. What he means by that is, if you understand the teachings that the Buddha shared deeply enough, when you look around the world, you'll see him everywhere. Because if you've learned the universal truth of impermanence, when you look around the world and you see impermanence, that's the Buddha. Not physically, not literally, but you know that the Buddha existed. Or when you see that someone is having craving, desire, attachment, and they're getting discontent because of their cravings and their desires and their attachments, That's because you see the teachings, you see him, because he's describing to you the way the world is. He's not describing to you the way the world should be. He's explaining to you the way the world is. And because he's explaining to you the way the world is, when you look around the world, if you understand the teachings, if you see the teachings in the world, you see him, and you will have no doubt that this individual actually lived, because his teachings fully explain everything that you're seeing in the world. But then also he says, one who sees me sees the teachings. What he means by that is he's a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. If you live during the lifetime of a Buddha doesn't teach one thing and then do something different. They actually teach something and they actually do that thing too, because they're teaching just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. So one who sees me sees the teachings. That's what the Buddha is saying, is that he's a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. Here's the actual last words of the Buddha, where he's talking to his student Ananda, who was one of his close students. He says, Ananda, it may be that you will think the teacher's instruction has ceased. Now we have no teacher. It should not be seen like this, Ananda, for what I have taught and explained to you as teachings and discipline will, at my passing, be your teacher. Now, monks, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. Strive on untiringly. So what the Buddha is saying here is, hey, I've taught you all these things for 45 years, essentially. And when I die, let those teachings be your teacher. The instruction hasn't ceased. It's just that this physical body is no longer here. So continue to learn the teachings, and that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment. But then his very last words is actually the first thing that you need to understand in order to get on the path to enlightenment. As a very wise individual, a very wise Buddha, the Buddha would have known that his last words are going to be well known in the world. So he used his last breath and his last words to actually be a teaching. This person was teaching from the time that he got to enlightenment all the way to his death. His last words were a teaching. He says, I declare to you, all conditioned things are of a nature to decay. What he's describing is the universal truth of impermanence, that all conditioned objects are impermanent. They're going to fade away. So in order to get onto the path to enlightenment, an individual would need to understand the universal truth of impermanence, because what the problem that the mind is experiencing in the unenlightened state is that it's craving permanence. So he's using his very last words to be able to deliver this final teaching to make sure that people understand that all things are going to decay, including him as a Buddha. He doesn't get eternal life necessarily. That's not what he's ever taught. He didn't teach that he would have eternal life. Instead, he's saying, hey, this body is impermanent. Even him, this body is impermanent. And this is going to help people if they understand his last words, that the world is impermanent. The mind in the unenlightened state is craving permanence, and you need to train your mind to not crave permanence because you live in an impermanent world. So this is everything that I taught here, or everything that I share in this last particular class. Even though we're going to be learning next week, we're going to be learning the 5 hindrances, the 5 things that are going to hinder you from getting to enlightenment. That's what I'm going to be teaching next week. And you can keep in mind that the group learning program is Sunday and Wednesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. And then there's the Pali, Canon, and English study group on Saturdays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. as well. So let me know what kind of questions you guys have here at the end of this class. I'll just kind of wrap up with answering y'all's questions. It looks like Yusuf has a question. Go ahead, sir.
I have read maybe a discourse for the Buddha was shocking for me. Because
I'm sorry, Yusuf. I'm having trouble hearing you. Your audio is not so clear today. Can you repeat that?
Would you like to go to another students till I hear that?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you, Yusuf.
Would you like to go to another student now? Till I hear that?
Oh, there isn't any other students that are asking questions right now.
Okay, so thank you, no problem. We will talk later.
Okay, you say we'll talk later?
Okay, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, sounds good. All right. Looks like Leo has a question. Go ahead, sir.
David, I have a general question, not about these questions. Is it okay, or to ask?
because of the time, why don't I go ahead and end class? And after I end class, then you can stick around and we can chat. Sound good?
Yeah, that's fun.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so what I'm going to do is just end class by thanking all of you guys for participating over the last 7 months, and thank you for your interest and your dedication and your diligence to learn and practice the teachings. As you guys need help, whether it's now or in the future, whether you decide to retake this program or any of the other programs, or whether you take a break and step away and just try to practice and integrate these teachings into your life, just know that you can always reach out and I'm here to help you. Next week, I'm going to be teaching the 5 hindrances. These are 5 things that are going to hinder you from being able to get to enlightenment. And then the week after that, I'm going to be restarting the program from the very beginning. And then remember, on Wednesdays, I do meditation with students and open up to any and all questions that you guys might have. So thank you again for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and have a really wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee khap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.